You're listening to the Second Look podcast, where we take a closer look at what we're learning each Sunday at Connection Church to help you grow in your walk with Christ. Here are your hosts, Pastor Joe Terreri and Pastor Dan DeRochers.
Welcome to the Second Look. My name is Dan.
And I'm Joe.
And we're here talking about Before the Booth, Part 3. But first, hello, Joe.
Good morning, Dan.
How are you this morning?
You know, I'm doing pretty well. I'm doing well. My
Good.
football team is playing tonight, Dan.
Okay, we're going to move on from there quickly. Joe, we're going to jump right in.
Oh, okay,
Because one of the questions that you asked yesterday at the introduction of your message, and we're going to bring it into the introduction of the Second Look, is what is mine to carry?
Yes.
One thing that people may not know, one phrase that you say very, very often.
How often?
Very often.
Okay.
And one could just poll your family and ask how often. I would quote, all I do is serve.
Yes, that sounds a little not humble that I say that, but that's what I do. All I do is serve. And I'm usually saying it when I'm doing something servant-oriented just to make sure everyone is seeing it at my house. So that's
well,
good.
and here at the office, you make us take pictures of you
Yes.
when you're
Yeah.
carrying things. And
Yeah.
that's why I bring it up.
Doing actual work, as I
Yeah,
like to say.
yeah.
Yeah, and I like people to, and I often say, what I actually say is someone take a picture of this and put it on Instagram. Because, I mean, did you even do anything for Jesus if it doesn't end up on your social media page or your church didn't post about it?
It's a great question. That's not the way we
Yeah.
operate,
Yeah.
but, some
Yeah,
do.
but it's actually me judging that. But my daughter Olivia does say to me often, don't worry, Dad, we'll put it on your tombstone. All he did was serve.
I mean, that would be amazing.
Oh, I think she'll probably end up doing
They'll
it because she has a
actually do
really
that.
good sense of humor. I hope it's there. I mean, that would be really great. But it's in quote.
Right.
Like, all I did was serve himself. Yes, Stan. Yes, there's a lot of service in my life.
Oh, that's
Yes.
amazing.
You know, my wife also, all she does is serve, but rarely talks about it, and I don't understand what the point is then.
Right. No, it's true. It's true.
I have a
we're
long way to go. Maybe you want to start looking for a new church. Keep going.
we're in the middle of a political season where
I thought you were saying political series.
yeah, a political season where every candidate would want you to believe that all they're doing is fighting for you.
That's right.
And yet, I find the conversations that I have with people, it's usually with so much skepticism that any of them are doing anything for any of us.
Yeah, like I would say in their minds they think they are. But I think that's one of the, okay, so let's be fair to them. Isn't this one of the interesting things about the actual political system? So often I hear people talking about issues and I'm just like, that's not where I'm living. I don't really care about that. But those are the issues you think about when you're campaigning to run a country. And I heard someone say this, and I'm not sure I agree. I'm not sure if I disagree. I'm not saying this is an opinion, but
So what we're going to do is whatever you're about to say, we're just going to slice that out and put that on Instagram.
Yeah, right, exactly. But I think someone said it's like your local elections are far more important than your federal election. Like who you vote for North Coventry Town Supervisor is actually going to have a greater impact on your life than who you vote for president. Now, do I think that's 100% true? No, because when we think about issues of national security and,
Sure.
there's a military conflict, obviously that would affect all of us very quickly, tax rates, things like that. But I think sometimes we do have the sense where people or politicians want to make it seem that they're working for us, and it seems like maybe, but I'm not sure that's actually the real issues in our life, which I think is one of my points for my sermon yesterday.
Yeah. Joe, we're week 3 of Before the Booth.
Yep.
And still talking about Jesus.
Well, that's good.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm thankful that that's your impression because that's exactly what I'm trying to do.
Yeah. Well, and I thought yesterday was a really good framing of where, like, I love the progression that we've taken. And it really did kind of frame what our responsibility is. Because our responsibility is not to save the world. Our responsibility isn't to own every single issue. But our responsibility is really for the condition of our heart and to pray and then to make a decision in a discerning way. And I think that's so balanced, and a way that each one of us, even if we make different decisions all the way down the ballot, right? Because it's not really one decision. It depends on where you're voting, but it's maybe 8 or 10 or 12 decisions that we need to make with that discernment in mind, with a prayerful heart. And even if we make different decisions, we can still do that with Jesus in mind.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most difficult realities to talk about is what happens when you have people who really love Jesus, who pray, who do their best to discern using biblical principles, and arrive in different locations.
Yeah.
Like, and I think that's where the humility piece is really important right now in the Church of Jesus Christ, so that the church doesn't become divided. Because, you and I have both heard pastors come. I mean, I read a statistic the other day that 50% of pastors are openly supporting Donald Trump, and the other 50% are not really saying directly who they're going to vote for. And then we've heard pastors say, I've heard two particularly say, you cannot be a Christian and vote for Kamala Harris. And so I would just say, it's like, okay, I do understand why you'd say that. Like, I actually get where you're coming from. I just don't think that's a helpful comment. I don't actually think that's true, as if we could be saved through voting, because our righteousness comes from Jesus Christ, not the button we push at the polls. So let's be so clear about that if we start, that's actually like becomes Jesus plus something else equals your salvation. And if we are saved by grace alone through faith, then we can never say, if you do this particular vote, you're not a Christian. You actually, like, those statements, without us realizing it, undermine the gospel. And so when it comes to the issue of discernment, we need to be really honest with one another that, okay, we may land in different places because we value different biblical values and we're applying it differently in that moment. And the question for us always is can we still walk together as brothers and sisters in Christ? Now, let me be very clear. I don't see a lot of disunity, really any, at Connection Church over, people who are going to vote for Harris and people who are going to vote for Trump, like, at one another. I've seen absolutely none of that. But I do think we need to make sure that there's not an undercurrent at Connection Church that all the real Christians are going to vote this way,
right,
or you're not really serious about Jesus if you vote this way. And that's what I've been trying. I mean, I think I've been intentionally vague about my own political opinions, because that's not what we're trying to do together when we're gathered as the people of God. We've come together to worship our King Jesus Christ, and we actually do need to give one another the charity to disagree. I think we have the right to challenge one another in kindness and love. I think if you really disagreed with someone politically, have them over for dinner, talk about it, and just love one another and move on with your life, because these aren't the big issues. And that's what I think our candidates are trying to make it seem like this is the biggest thing that's ever going to happen. And please hear me. It is so important. Elections are so important, but they're always penultimate in the life of a Christian.
Yeah, I mean, being able to have a conversation with someone with whom you disagree. People disagree with some of the choices that I make. The man purse that I carry, the car that I drive.
Well, that's a bad decision, but go ahead. Not the car, the man purse. Yeah, but that's fine.
But a lot of people have a lot of opinions, and honestly, aside from the man purse thing, but there are things that are highly politicized. Like, I drive an electric car.
Sure.
Right? And a lot of people that are very close to me have so many opinions about, and it's a politicized thing. I don't see it that way. I think it's great, and with zero politicism behind. I don't even know if that's a word behind it.
Yeah.
But it's just a choice and a thing, right?
Isn't it interesting though? But what you're actually talking about is we're attaching judgment, assuming we know someone's motives.
Yeah.
And so that's actually what it means to be a judgmental person. Like, when you see someone doing something, like, we'll use, like, if you must be liberal if you drive a Tesla because, this and this, because you have a bleeding heart for the climate and you're just trying to protect the environment. And it's like, or I just really think this car performs well and I like it.
Right.
And so I think like when we become judgmental about what's in people's hearts, that's a really weird place to be. We should judge, and I think the scriptures are clear about that. We absolutely should judge the fruit in one another's life from a character, morality, and spiritual perspective. But when you judge someone's heart because of the car they drive, that's just like unhelpful.
Unless it's a Subaru.
Right. Okay. Talk about temptation in my life to say something, but I won't. Because I'm walking in the Spirit this morning.
My parents both
on
drive
Monday.
Subarus.
Do they? Okay. My mom drives a Subaru. That's so funny. But I do just think like when it comes to the issue of politics, when our hearts are right before the Lord, seriously, and this comes back to the condition of your heart, when there is like love in our heart for Jesus Christ, and it's really clear that Jesus is first, like we can't love people well if Jesus isn't first. And when Jesus is first, we're actually able to have more charity with one another. And, it's different if you're just joking around with your friends, right? Like my friend always makes fun of me because I drive a Honda and they're like, when are you going to get an American car? And I'm like, they're made in Alabama. But it's like, I know he's not judging me. Like we're just having fun.
Right.
But people really do assume things about us. So I would just want people to know you should assume nothing about my politics because of what I say from the stage.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to say from the stage is we need to keep the scriptures, all the scriptures, open and in front of us. And I think for all of us, and listen, I would guess at Connection Church, my feeling is we definitely lean more right if I were to poll the audience about who they're going to vote for. I don't think everyone's on the right, but I think we probably are more right than we are left. And I get it. Like, part of that is cultural.
Yep.
Part of that is the area of the country in which we live. Part of it is our economic status at this point in life. Part of it is just conviction and maybe even our Christian faith being tied to that. But I think if that becomes our thing, like, and I said it in the third service yesterday, and I was so regretting not saying it in the first and second service. I just thought of it. Like, we handed out our fall festival signs, and I kind of made a quip in the third service. If you took a fall festival sign and you have a political sign on your lawn, please do not put up our fall festival sign next to your political sign, because I don't want the message to be in our community, oh, Fall Festival at Connection Church, and they're aligning themselves with this candidate.
Right.
It's I'm so serious about that. Like, choose a sign to put up, because I think in our culture, there's just an assumption that Christians have aligned themselves with a certain party. And listen, there may be legitimate reasons for that, but we need people to know our actual message is the gospel, not the gospel plus right-wing or left-wing politics or centrist politics, like as if the goal is let's be in the center. Like, that's not the answer either. It's like, no, we have a unique calling in the world to be gospel-first people, and our political opinions, we can share those for sure, but we need to be wise that the sharing of political opinions doesn't overshadow the gospel, because we are called in 2 Corinthians 5, our actual identity is in the world is ambassadors of Christ, agents of reconciliation. And the bad news for us is culturally speaking, as soon as you bring politics into that message, people just dismiss you because they think, oh, that's what you're really about. Right. And is that fair? No. But what does Paul say? We need to become all things to all people so that we might win some. And so in our culture, what we need to become is people who are Christ-first people, so that the message of Christ is not being diluted by our political opinions. So I am not asking people not to have opinions. I have opinions. What I am saying is we need to be wise in how we share them, because we only get one chance sometimes with people to be Jesus people, not Republican or Democratic Party people.
Would you say it's equally as important to not overshadow the gospel with our political opinions, mixing as well, right? Mixing the gospel with political opinions is dangerous as well, right?
Yeah, and I do think there's a tension here, because we are entitled to have our opinions even as Christians, and I think it's okay if we talk about how our faith informs our politics. Yeah. But if we do what we said yesterday when it comes to the discernment piece, here's what I actually think is missing as Christians from a lot of our discourse. Being on someone's side is fine. but ignoring what's wrong and excusing what is obviously unchristian, I think that's what's problematic. That we're not being fully honest about what we're doing. Like, here's what I think honesty looks like. I'm going to vote for this candidate. I really like this, and this about them. Though this part of their platform or how they carry themselves or how they speak, I think that is deeply problematic and does not represent Jesus. But I can't bring myself to vote for the other side for these reasons.
Yeah.
So what we're actually just saying is no one who is running for office fully represents our values. You can't put all of that on Facebook. That's going to come in our relationships. So yes, you're entitled to put a sign out, but just understand how culture sees you. Everyone loves to put one another in buckets.
Yep.
And I'm actually saying, try to be a little bit more confusing for people. Like,
That's
and,
so
and
good.
Here's what is confusing for people. Nuance.
Yep.
People want everything to be black or white, binary. You're either here or here. And I'm saying, as God's people, we are in some ways politically homeless right now, because even you sent me an article this morning where neither of our candidates are talking about their faith.
Yep.
That's like a non-issue. And so we are choosing in this moment, no matter who gets elected, we're choosing someone who is very secular. And I don't say that in judgment. I say that based on how those people are presenting themselves. And that's where we're at. And like, as God's people, we can just be honest about that and still be honoring.
Yeah. So can we just dig into our own hearts for the last couple of minutes?
Sure.
How do we, amidst praying and discerning and then ultimately making a decision, operating in the world, how do we take all this tumultuous time and pray, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven?
Yeah, I think the key there is humility. And I think we should, especially when things are, and maybe for people listening, you're like, it's not unclear to me what should happen.
Sure.
And it's like, fine, it's not unclear to you. But I do think we would be wise as the people of God to start with, God, you actually know what's best. You actually know what you want to do. And we don't see everything you see. So, Lord, I'm asking that your kingdom would come. And you know what you're saying when you say that? You're saying, God, I want what you want. So I lay down what I think is best. And I'm saying, I align my heart with yours. Lord, would you just continue to show me what you want? And Lord, you know we're living in a time and we're voting, at least when it comes to the presidency, for two people who are not holding deeply to their Christian convictions, even if they have some sort of faith background. Like, that's not, they're not running on that. Like,
right.
So let's just be honest that whoever gets in the White House next, they are not going to fully represent you, Jesus. And so, Lord, you need to give us wisdom about what's best, and you need to show us what's best. And listen, it's okay to have those political convictions. And here's, I think this is really freeing. In areas where the scriptures are unclear, we don't need to put a Bible verse on why we're voting for. It's okay to say, I'm voting for this person because I think their view of capitalism is best for my life. Okay, like, that's fine. You don't need to spiritualize that.
Yeah.
That's just an intellectual statement that you are entitled to. But let's not slap Jesus' name on something that actually has nothing to do with Jesus. And that's really what I'm calling for, is just honesty, discernment, and then also loving all the people behind the issues, because God loves people behind issues. And that's where I think the worldliness can set in. And here's how you know worldliness is infecting your heart: when you find yourself angry at people you've never met.
Yeah.
Like, if you're angry at Haitian immigrants, that's really odd. Like that, there's nothing about that is in the ballpark of walking with Jesus. But when we continue to feed our soul that Haitian immigrants in Ohio is the real problem in the world, guess what we're actually doing? Giving ourselves permission to dehumanize people.
Yeah.
Do I think immigration and people coming into the country is a problem? Of course. Do I think we need immigration reform? Of course. But that does not mean that I'm allowed to hate, that I'm allowed to see those people as my enemies.
Right.
I'm called to love them. And what did Jesus say in one of his most famous parables when there is a Samaritan man laying in the road?
Mm-hmm.
Who's my neighbor? It's the outsider, the person who doesn't belong in your community. It's the person who's not a true Israelite. That's your neighbor. We have to be honest as God's people. Hate and othering people cannot be part of our lives. Can I say one thing before we sign off? So next week is our last week of Before the Booth. And so I'm feeling done about talking about politics. I've said everything I wanted to say, to be honest. I've talked about seeing who Jesus is. I've talked about our call as the church, and I talked this week about our call as individuals. And so to kind of wrap up Before the Booth, this coming Sunday, I want to preach out of Ephesians 6. And I want to talk about the real war we're facing. And I want to talk about spiritual warfare, because there is all this talk in our political discourse right now, how we're in a war and we're in a fight. And what I actually want to call people to is to wake up to the actual fight we're facing, which is spiritual warfare, and that the Christian life is not a playground, it's a battlefield.
Awesome, Joe. Thanks for that. And then you can join us for our next sermon series called Booth. This has been...
That's not true.
This has been another episode of The Second Look. You can catch this sermon and much more at our website, cometoconnect.com. Have a great week.